coming. It's really exciting to see you all here. I'm only going to take up a few seconds of your time before introducing our speakers, but thank you, Becky and Lotsy, for finding this fantastic place and making it happen here. It's so beautiful and really exciting to have this exploration as well as a speaker event at the same time. So the Explorers Club is now more than 120 years old. For that time, it's brought together people of like mind who believe in the power of exploration for the sake of discovery and understanding more about the world around us, helping to conserve it and understand it better. And it really does that across scientists, philanthropists, explorers, technicians, some artists, and people who want to see those things happen as well. Members have been the first to the North Pole and the South Pole, and the highest point on Earth and the lowest point under the seas and the moon. Today, about 4,000 members are all around the world doing interesting things, including members here in this room, and a lot of chapter friends also here in this room who we're really grateful for and make the local St. Louis chapter the wonderful and thriving thing it is, as well as our guests too. So, of course, we're all here in a river city. We know that rivers are extremely important to exploration, particularly in this part of the world, but all around the world. From native people taking canoes up and down riverways all across North America to, of course, the Lewis and Clark expedition going up and down river systems. Rivers have been really important to exploration, but of course they face lots of threats from the way that we live today. And so I'm really happy to have our two speakers today from American Rivers to be able to talk about the 5 decades of work that American Rivers has been doing to help conserve river systems.
Steve and I'll start.
Yeah.
Right? So Steve and Mike.
Yeah. So Steve, who's the director of philanthropy for American Rivers Central Region, among other regions, and Mike, who's the regional director for American Rivers. Yep. So Steve, you're going to start us off.
Yep.
Today.
All
And
set.
They've asked that you please be generous with your questions and comments during the presentation too.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you so much. Hope everybody's well fed from the delicious dinner. And so thank you all for coming to the Explorer Club for having us, for all of you attending, for the people who've helped make this happen, especially Rick and Lotsy, and the suggestion that we come do this. So I'm Steve White. I think I met most of you, but so Steve White, and I'm the director of philanthropy for the Central Region. And Mike Sertle, as you just heard, he's the regional director for Central. And so really look forward to talking to you about rivers tonight. I'll talk at more of a national level. Mike will talk more at the regional level. And we'll hopefully, as you just heard, have as many questions as you like, right? So if there's something you're curious about, or if there's something that you want a little bit more clarification on, or any of that, then the more questions, the better. So I'll start here. This is the confluence of the Illinois and the Mississippi. And so we are absolutely a country of rivers, right? We're blessed with this. The other countries like China have, I think it's a fifth of the rivers that we have in terms of the number of river miles. And so this really is a fantastic part of our country. And from the standpoint of being here, I mean, what a wonderful place to talk about rivers on the banks of the Missouri here in, a place that celebrates one of the greatest river explorations that, the country's ever seen. So as you can see, it's the rivers are really the lifeblood of the country, right? And they're important for lots of reasons. First of all, they are the source of over 70% of our drinking water, right? I would imagine almost certainly that all the water that we drink here in this region is coming straight out of these rivers, right? And so a source of that. In addition, there's as far as supporting wildlife, there's blue heron just like this on the Weir out in front that was there all afternoon. So that was kind of cool to see. But they say out in the West, as an example, that 80% of the wildlife spends half of their life in the river corridor, right? So, from a wildlife standpoint, the river supports so much of that. As you're saying, that some of the threats that we're seeing, what's part of the challenge there is that species are going extinct in the freshwater river systems faster than any other biome. And that's because how we have used or overused our rivers. And we'll talk more about that. And also from a sense of community, right? I mean, we were talking earlier about how, there are several people talked about some of the river races that come down and end here. And, we see this across the country, how people really do embrace their rivers in their cities, right? They say that I think it's over 75% of the people in the country live within a mile of a river, right? I mean, what a fantastic situation there, and where you have that natural corridor that you can become a part of. I grew up playing in creeks. I know Mike grew up playing in the Mississippi. I imagine a lot of us did, right? And it's part of who we are, as a country. And then in addition to these things, of course, they water our crops. They serve as transportation highways. So there's so much that rivers give to us, whether as resources or as treasures, right? And I imagine that many of you have your favorite rivers that you think of when you think of a special place. For me, there's a small creek in northern Wyoming that's, you hike about an hour and a half in, and it's like a hanging meadow up below these magnificent peaks with the stream just meanders through, and it's got 17, 18-inch cutthroat trout that are there all year long. They're resident there. There's a waterfall that keeps them there. But it is one of the most special places you'd ever see. And they bring us that magic in addition to bringing us our drinking water and our water for our crops and these other things. So with that, as was mentioned, even though they are great treasures to us, and even though they are great resources for us, they are extremely threatened. And so to tell a little bit about the story of American rivers, do you remember when the Cuyahoga River caught on fire? Anybody remember that, right? Oh, yeah. So that was in '68 that the big one was. That was the 15th time that the Cuyahoga River in Ohio had caught on fire, right? And they had tried to solve the problem locally. They couldn't. They actually asked Congress to solve the problem, and that was what spawned the Clean Water Act. At the same time, a great many of our major rivers were being dammed, especially out in the West. And so this spawned the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act as a way to protect the rivers that would otherwise be dammed. So with that, you had these two tools, but there was no organization that was really using those tools in order to save rivers and to protect them. And so a group of river enthusiasts got together in Denver. One of our founders, Claude Terry, put $20 on the table and said, I'm in. And that was the start of American Rivers. Now we're over 125 people. Our national budget's probably $40 million. So that was our origin. Sadly, and we've done tremendous, as our two former board members here can testify, right? Tremendous amount of work that's been done, but there's so much more to do, right? And so we'll talk about some of those challenges that include, clean water, removing dams, et cetera. So it is American Rivers' vision that rivers should be clean, healthy, resilient places, right? For people and for wildlife. And so that's what I want to talk about and kind of take you through at a national level, and then Mike will at a more of a regional level. But let me just stop there for a second. Anybody have any questions about kind of what was going on? Yeah.
What was the dam?
That dam is in Montana. I think that's one of the ones on the Missouri. but I'm not sure of that. I think that's,
We were on the board, they took down a big one like that.
yeah, so the one they took, I think that would have been the Condit Dam on the White Salmon.
Yeah, but
Right.
that was a lot smaller than this one.
It was in a canyon,
It was
yeah,
in a canyon.
yeah, so this,
Very narrow, but high.
high, very high, yeah,
Is that dam still there?
yes, yeah. So,
You mentioned 1973. Was it that the year that the Merrimack River, there was a vote not to dam it?
I don't recall that. I'll have to look into that.
It sounds about right.
Yeah,
I remember in 8th grade, I wrote a paper opposing that. And, but the fact that you know, we can still flood the current river instead of just having a giant lake in the center.
all right. And I have a shared experience. I was describing to someone earlier that, so when I was a senior in high school, they were trying to dam and did dam, where the main rivers my dad and I used to hunt and fish and walk on. And so they invited me to speak at the North Carolina legislature opposing it. And of course, they didn't listen to the 17-year-old kid. They went ahead and damned it. But it was the start of a lot of interest in this stuff. So,
Question.
yeah.
I had a couple questions.
Yeah.
So are all dams bad?
What a fantastic question. So are all dams bad, right? So from an American River standpoint, we recognize that there are lots of dams that serve useful purposes, okay?
I mean,
And so,
California doesn't exist.
what's that?
Like California didn't have,
Well, if you go back to the reason we have most of our dams, it was the Industrial Revolution, right? So here's a question. Who'd care to guess how many dams we have in the country?
30,000.
30,000? Anybody want to guess higher than that?
55,000.
Keep going. By an order of 10, right? So there are over 500,000 dams in the country, okay? Who would guess how many are in Missouri? 23,000, okay? Now, of the 23,000, 5,000 are registered with the National Inventory, where they see which ones are producing hydro or serving some purpose. So what percentage of the 5,000 Missouri dams that are registered with the National Inventory produce hydro? What percentage?
8.
0. It rounds to 0, right? So as far as what these dams do, the average age of a dam in Missouri is 50. The average age of dams across the country is like 87, right? So virtually all of these dams, of the 500,000 dams, an extremely high percentage of them were built, 50 to 80 years ago. Some of them that we've taken out dams that were 200 years old, right? That were there because that was the only power source, right? That was the power source for the Industrial Revolution. The mill fell down and the dam's still there, right? Dam's been blocking that river, right, ever since. And I want to get into why dams are bad for rivers and for communities, but you said you had a couple questions, so.
Well, that number, like how big does the dam have to be to qualify as a dam?
That's another great question. So we're not talking about like farm ponds, right? Where you basically are blocking the head of the river, right? We're talking about run-of-river dams where you have stream flow above and below, right? So otherwise, if it's considered farm pond, it doesn't make that inventory. So 500,000, right? Huge numbers. And the reason, so let me talk a little bit about, I'll go through the different ways that we work to help rivers, but I'll stay on dams for a minute and explain that, and then we can move on. And please, as many questions as you've got, the more the better. So if you think about so the question, why are dams bad, right? If the river is dammed, the single best thing you can do for that river is to take the dam out. And the reason is that, first of all, if you think about when the dam blocks a river, if it starts in the mountains, goes to its mouth, then instead of it being one contiguous ecosystem, right, then you now have 4 ecosystems, right? You have cold water stream, you have a warm water reservoir, because it's an old dam, it almost certainly is a top spill, So the water on top gets hot and then spills over. So then you have a warm water stream, and then you have more tributaries come in, so it's a cold water stream again. So you have, instead of one ecosystem, you now have four, which means you have 4 different types of bugs, 4 different types of fish, 4 different types of mussels or snails or amphibians, all of that, right? So, and then, as seasons change, that wildlife, those fish especially, they need to be able to move up and down. That's their life cycle, right? You put the dam there, and that blocks that completely. So, so when, as an example, on the Coosa River in Alabama, they put in a series of 6 dams, and they drove 30 species to extinction. It's the biggest mass extinction in North America because of the dams. The dams destroy the habitat. So the first thing is that it destroys habitat and the ability for animals, fish in particular, to move upstream and downstream. The second is, you've seen dam failures here in this part of the country. Where I'm from in North Carolina, we just had 2 huge storms you may have heard about, Hurricane Helene and then Tropical Storm Chantal. Those 2 caused, I think it's 66 dams to either fail or to be severely damaged, where, for instance, maybe the river comes around the abutment and takes out the abutment, so it's no longer a functioning dam. So those are life-threatening events. So from a public safety standpoint, if you have these old dams that are sitting there that are almost certainly not being maintained, you get a big storm, they're likely to fail and then come down. So back to the 5,000 dams that are registered here in Missouri with the National Inventory, of those, 1/3 of them are considered high hazard, where if they were to fail, somebody would die or there'd be significant loss of property, right? So from a public safety standpoint, it's bad. From a water quality standpoint, what you have is that top layer that's warm. You have nutrients, fertilizer from agriculture that come in, hits that warm water, and that grows algae, right? You may remember Toledo had to shut down their water supply a couple years ago for 3 days because they had algae in their water system from impoundments above that were spilling down into their city. Right? It took 3 days to resolve that issue, and so water quality impacts. You get the idea that dams cause these very bad problems. The beauty of it is when you take the dam out, all of that goes away immediately. Right? Once you have running water, you don't have algae, you don't have the thermal problems with the temperature, you don't have the threat to public safety, and you don't have blockage of the migration corridor. So dam removal is one of those rare things where, as the Holtons can say from taking out the dam on the Maple River in Michigan, when you take that dam out, you're doing what some of our donors call permanent good, because they're never going to put the dam back. You've done something that's going to last forever. So let me stop there. That's me doing a lot of talking. Any other questions on dams or any points of curiosity on?
So what's the reason why the majority, you said the Industrial Revolution, but 500,000, like, I assume that there's been development where water should be, where things were undammed in lots of places, houses and towns and developments would be flooded. Is that why it's along the popular route?
So the main reason they can't be removed is it's expensive, right? To take out a dam that's, let's say a dam that would be across here, right? That's probably a $300,000 project, right? Because you can't get it wrong, right? You have to understand all that's in the sediment, if there could be PCBs in the sediment that's washed into it. If you have a sewer line that's below the dam, that's above the dam, so there's a tremendous amount of engineering and design that has to go in to make it something you can remove. If you picture a town with, a dam in a city park, then there's no reason to keep that dam. And when we've worked with a number of towns in Pennsylvania, especially where they tend to have that, the feedback afterwards is people say that they had forgotten how much they like the sound of moving water, right? So instead of the lake, you end up with a babbling brook, and who doesn't like that? Go ahead.
I had maybe kind of the inverse of that question, which
Mhm.
is, when you remove a dam, presumably then what was lake bed becomes not lake bed, it's
Mhm.
open ground.
Mhm.
So it seems like I'm from the botanical garden, we talk a lot about doing ecological restoration. It seems like that's the prime area for ecological restoration, so replanting. Do you have to do that actively? Can you just leave it to regrow, or are there other sort of development things or building things that one tends to do in those old lake beds?
Fantastic question. I don't know if everybody could hear that, but the question was, how do you replant or reforest or reestablish the plant life where there was a reservoir and now it's open land? Great question. What we find is that there have been some places like the Elwha River in Washington. All right, right. So when the dams were removed and the stream reestablished itself into its new channel, and then you had all that sediment left, there were seeds in the sediment that immediately started to grow. Then we just took out 4 dams on the Klamath River, which goes from Oregon into California. And there it's a process of replanting native plants to stabilize the banks. So it is a big part of the project, not just taking the dam out, but making sure that the way that the river reestablishes itself has permanence. So yeah, very much. Yeah, it is really interesting to see. Other questions about dams?
What the graphic with the river, what was the color difference?
I'm sorry?
Of the watersheds, the first slide.
Oh, so those are different basins. So the Mississippi drains this in the aqua, appropriate color, right? So these are all different basins and drainages.
So like the top of the orange near
That's the Columbia.
And then it comes out.
And the Columbia all comes out through and
The Gulf.
into the Puget Sound. So,
Is
and like this is the Apalachicola, Flint, Chattahoochee Basin that comes out of Atlanta that been so many lawsuits about, that comes down into Florida, or the Rio Grande, right, the American side of that. So, John Wesley Powell, if you're familiar with him, who navigated the Colorado River. So, as an explorer, he ranks high on the list. He lobbied that state boundaries should be on water basin lines. He thought this should be the map of the country, not the way that our states are. Right? So, falls into the fun factor. Okay, anything else on dam removal? I want to keep going so that we have. Yeah, go ahead.
The Missouri River is longer than the Mississippi and drains a lot more land. Shouldn't the Mississippi be a tributary of the Missouri?
Never heard that question before. There's no local bias involved in that, is there? Zero local bias. So I'd have to look into that. I don't know. I don't know why it's considered that. I'm sure there's some naming convention, but I would guess it has to do with how long the Mississippi was considered part of the country.
Western civilization
Right.
discovered and traversed first.
Yeah. Probably goes back there. Yeah.
So it says every city river swimmable. So the Seine got swimmable in France.
Yeah.
And what does something like that cost to do? And why didn't they do it years ago? They did for the Olympics.
Let me use
How hard is it to clean a river?
Yeah, so excellent. Let me use a more local example, which is the Chicago River, okay? So in 2011, what we had was raw sewage, basically, being dumped into the Chicago River, all right? So we have a program called Most Endangered Rivers, where we list rivers that are, there's some decision that can be made that will save the river, right? And so we listed the Chicago River as one of the country's most endangered. It shamed the city council. Within 3 days, they had a council meeting, and they appropriated money to study what could be done, right? So this past week, we posted on our social media, there was a public swim in the Chicago River, right? So it took that long from 2011 to now to build the waste treatment plants and to manage the wastewater in a way that it wasn't coming into the river as untreated, and now you have people swim. So that was a very expensive project, but it's really, you know, rather than focus on the expense, it's something that's necessary, right? We as a civilization should not be having our, you know, that be the river of the city, right? So yeah, so it takes a long time, it is expensive, but in a place like that, whether it's Paris or Chicago, it's absolutely necessary. I'll just mention a couple other quick things. So these are our goals as we go forward for the organization. So of the 500,000, we want to take out 30,000 by 2050. So that's, right now we take out about, we, meaning the entire dam removal community, we're kind of the leader of that, and we do trainings around the country. We help people with getting federal funding, et cetera. But the community of the dam removal community takes out roughly 100 now, and we're trying to ramp that up. If we do it 15% growth per year in that number, we'll get to 30,000 by 2050. Another is to protect 1 million miles of river. So we have established an inventory of protected rivers, and we have roughly 100,000 left to go. But that tool lets local communities understand what the paths are to get their rivers protected, whether that's riparian buffer, you know, ordinances at a city level, or it's outstanding water classifications at the state level or nationally at wild and scenic. Right, thank you. This is a very subtle way of saying that I'm talking too much, I think. Thank you. So, and that's the role that we played. Again, Michael talked more local work, but at a national level, you know, we have a 50-state plan for dam removals where we're working with states to do that. We have a national inventory of protected rivers where we work with local groups in order to help them be effective in protecting their local rivers. Floodplain restoration, again, Mike's expert on this and he'll talk more locally, but the idea here that if you can connect a river to its floodplain, then that flooding danger goes down dramatically. And in terms of the habitat restoration, it's tremendous, right? There are a number of duck hunters here, you know, and what you see by having wetlands that are adjacent to rivers is a much healthier environment than a channel with levees, right? That's, you know, that's not a river ecosystem that's healthy, but if you take those levees down, if you push them back and you have a real river corridor, it becomes that. So we mentioned another goal is to have every city, every river be swimmable. That's a lofty goal, but you know, we're on it. And then lastly here, to build a river majority. And the idea there is both from a legislative standpoint and from a outreach and community standpoint, right? We want people to love the river, right? You look at Greenville, South Carolina. Their downtown, they had a lot of their buildings facing away from the river, right? And they had the foresight to re-engineer their downtown, put in a river walk, beautiful bridges, and turn the buildings around. And now that's a beautiful community where, you know, any time of the day or night, you're going to see families out playing in the river and people walking along, holding hands. They've got light. It's nice, right? It's beautiful, right? And that's what we want, right? That's kind of the vision of having cities embrace their rivers. So, and we do that in each of those programs. We have for each of those programs, we achieve that by people, policy, and projects, right? So we will work with our regional teams and with local organizations to drive projects, whether it's dam removal or river protection. We'll have, from a people standpoint, we're trying to expand our community and grow the number of people who care about the rivers. You know, we appreciate you being here tonight. You're a part of that, right? So you can congratulate yourself for that. We appreciate it. You know, and then from a policy standpoint, we feel very strongly that a glass of water is not a partisan issue, right? That a clean glass of water should be bipartisan. Everybody can get behind that. And so, we work across the aisle. We work with the hydropower industry to come up with agreements where they'll support dam removal of obsolete dams, and we'll support retrofitting existing dams with hydro. We're that kind of organization. We're very practical and pragmatic because we know that we could win the fight if there's a fight that has to happen. And if there is a fight, we will fight, and we're excellent at that from a legal standpoint, because clean water will win, right? That being the case, we'd rather win an agreement, right? Because an agreement will last a lot longer. You win a fight, then you're going to be back in court in 10 years, right? But if you can win an agreement, that can last forever. So, any other questions on kind of the national, two-level, national and regional? Any other? Yeah.
What do you think was don't believe in climate change?
I would say that obviously there are different perspectives on that. What I think a lot of the climate change conversation that I see is about what's caused it. I think having seen how the severity of storms that are hitting North Carolina is clearly increasing. Yeah. So the fact that storms are more severe and more frequent, the fact that droughts are longer and deeper, those are kind of undeniable, right? And so what we try to, from a climate change standpoint, we tend to orient more on the reality is that we have more severe weather events, and we need to make our rivers more adaptable to those events, right? I'm sorry to be going on so long, but as an example,
That wasn't a cue to be quiet. It was just a little part of
it's my second cue. If there's one more, if the lights go out, I'm leaving. All right. So, but as an example, there was when Helene hit, right? The Watauga River, which is where my dad taught me to fly fish, right? Beautiful North Carolina river. There were 2 dams there that over the past 5 years we've helped take out. One of them, the Ward's Mill Dam, if you picture the dam here, the mill house here, defunct for years, and then the family's home right there, right? When that hurricane came, because there was no dam, the water went straight through that valley, right? And exited. There was no backup. Had there been a dam there, the engineers concluded that the mill would have been gone and the house would have been gone, and the woman who lived there, who owned the mill, owned the dam and gave us permission to take it out, she was there trapped during the storm, and she said that it saved her life to have taken that dam out, right? So this is a life and death thing, right? So we are very serious about helping our rivers be more resilient and help them to adapt, and their communities adapt to be able to handle more severe storms.
And that's so true, Steve. When I was in South Carolina, that was in the aftermath of a big hurricane. South Carolina has a lot of dammed up rivers to create a community, build a house around it. But when a big hurricane sat over that region for a long time, they had a cascading failure effect. Wiped out maybe a dozen big dams. It was a big problem.
Awful. Yeah, South Carolina had 87 dam failures in that short period of time. When those, and just a quick note, I feel like I'm talking too long. In South Carolina, you get the storm surge, so there's flooding before the storm. Then the rain comes and that floods. And then the way that South Carolina, North Carolina is, then the storm moves up into the mountains before it turns north. So it rains in the mountains, and that water comes back downstream. So these communities get hit 3 times, and the chance of a dam failing, it's not one event that could make that dam fail. It's 3, right? And each one can weaken it. So that, think about 100 dams failing in a couple year period. It was terrible. So that's why we do this. Yeah. Okay, other questions at national level? I want to, you've been so, oh yeah.
So under your projects and like research, I'm kind of curious what your top research priorities are right now. Or do you have any?
Yeah, so
That was brand new last week. Steve hasn't been involved in those talks yet.
so Michael,
Maybe it's a question for Mike.
well, I'll just say,
Steve can answer, but yeah.
so Michael described at the local level. From a national standpoint, there are several things that we are looking at kind of in a research way, right? One is floodplains, right? We took out the first major dam removal project was in 1999 on the Kennebec, which by the way now has 6 million alewife coming upstream, largest alewife population on the planet, and it was almost zero 25 years ago, right? You were there, that's right. So the Kennebec in Maine, right, is, so that was 99. Floodplain restoration is about 15 years behind where dam removal is, right? So we're doing more now on that. And so there's a lot more research that's being done and learning to be had on how it is that we can make the changes needed from a river standpoint and keep communities safe, right? Because you have to strike that balance, right? Back to being pragmatic, it's not about taking the levees down and then flooding out communities, right? But there are ways to do this. There's a lot of technology and insight that can be gathered for that topic. So a lot of it's that. The other thing I'll just mention is from a biodiversity loss standpoint, we have a major research project going on for mussels, right? Because mussels are kind of the canary in the coal mine, and they're, in addition to being extremely valuable as a species in an ecosystem, but we're losing them at a precipitous rate. And so, so we have a research project going on primarily through the University of Kentucky, but working with other universities across, I think it's 14 states, to understand, is this a pathogen? Are they sick? Is it a pollution issue? Is it a temperature? What is causing this? So some of it is more like river functionality, and some of it's more like ecosystem. Yeah, the mussel project's fantastic. Okay, they're about to turn the light off on me before I bring up Mike. Any other questions? Okay, I'll come back up and give you a feel-good story in a minute. And turn to Mike.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Sorry, hit the red button here.
Yep, that's it.
All right. Well, thank you all. Thank you for having me tonight. As Steve said, my name is Michael Sertle. I go by Mike. It's perfectly fine. I joined American Rivers just over a year ago, but I've been working in this landscape professionally for about 20 years. I'm originally from Northwest Illinois, Galena, Illinois. If there's anybody that likes to ski, Chestnut Mountain Ski Resort, out by Dubuque, Iowa. That's where I'm from. Born and raised Mississippi River, 3 generations. Fun fact, my wife even agreed to name our oldest son River after the Mississippi River. These are my 10 states of the Central region. However, I also help oversee our Mississippi River program, where it touches Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Kentucky, and Tennessee. So a large region. Across that region, make sure I don't get ahead of my own self here. Yes, all right, that's coming up. As Steve mentioned, American Rivers nationally has a lot of river conservation realms that we work in. We call them communities of practice. Each region is a little bit different, okay? Hydropower, very big program for us in the Northeast and in California. In Iowa, hydropower is not going to be so much of a program for us. So within my region and bordering Illinois and Wisconsin and Minnesota by default, and Kentucky and Tennessee, which is only like 5 counties, this is roughly the prioritization of how we are approaching it. Number 1 is floodplain restoration. That is my background, especially in this upper Mississippi River, lower Missouri River landscape. And yes, it is by miles, and you're correct. If we're using the appropriate scientific ranking, perhaps there should be a name change. But who am I to fight history. So floodplains, floodplain reconnection and floodplain restoration. So that locally, Columbia Bottoms Conservation Area here. Some of you may or may not know, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Missouri Department of Conservation are doing a massive levee setback. They're taking the levee off the bend, they're putting it back against the bluff, essentially where the St. Louis Zoo's new area is going to be. So that's reconnecting that floodplain. That's taking the levee, moving it to the other side of the 2,000 acre conservation area and letting the Missouri River have it when it floods. Those types of projects. Projects such as bottomland hardwood reforestation, working with national wildlife refuges and others to do bottomland tree plantings. I myself am proud to say I did over 1,000 acres of converting flood-prone farm ground to bottomland hardwoods in southern Illinois with national wildlife refuges in a previous gig. River restoration, this is dam removal. Dam removal, aquatic connectivity. Not my background, Steve did a fantastic job, so I will keep moving on that, but for all the great reasons Steve outlined as to why dam removal, and to your very good question, Carolyn, about which ones do we take out, which ones do we leave. Mississippi River, we would lose 93% of U.S. agricultural commerce if we took the lock and dams out of the Mississippi River. That's how much U.S. ag commerce goes down. 93% of U.S. agricultural commerce produced in the basin goes down the Mississippi River. It is in the realm of billions of dollars of commerce. Those lock and dams, probably not coming out. They are getting modified. The other stuff, the stuff that is the old, as we talked in Missouri, stream crossings. Just concrete slabs and culverts, right? And unfortunately, as we saw this year, there's a lot of those that caused deaths, or the one, there was a poor little child, and then 2 adults got trapped in the culvert trying to get them out this summer. So very dangerous. Clean water, both realms. Clean water in municipal clean water, urban clean water. St. Louis, with the upgrade of the system coming out of the Missouri River, has improved their water system. We go across the other side, East St. Louis, Cahokia Heights. They don't even know where their 13,000 miles of combined stormwater and sewage water go, or if their pipes are still connected. Big problems. So looking at how do we work with communities, other organizations, like I talked about Missouri Botanical, we'd love to work with y'all to look at how do we increase the rate of rain gardens, green infrastructure, greenness in St. Louis to also capture stormwater. River protection. River protection is kind of not so much here, but as we look out in the prairies, wild and scenic river federal designations. Around here, it'll be working with partners such as Great Rivers Habitat Alliance and Ducks Unlimited on conservation easements in the floodplain, working with Farm Bill folks on floodplain. This picture, if nobody is familiar with this, this barge is pretty much famous up and down the Mississippi River now. This photo shows all 4 of these in one. This is Dogtooth Bend. This is in southern Illinois, right where the Mississippi, just before it joins the Ohio River. That is a barge like you see going here. That is sitting 2 miles from the Mississippi River. The Mississippi River is that water in the background. In the 2000, I'll get this wrong, YouTube, don't check me on this, 2016 flood, I believe, a 1 mile hole was blown in the Len Small levee, flooding 17,000 acres in a hairpin turn in the Mississippi River. Because of the lack of the number of folks living there and individual property owners, the Army Corps elected not to rebuild the hole in the levee. So now, as long as there's a 9-foot navigation channel for barge traffic, once it hits 32 foot on the Cape Girardeau gauge, it starts coming through that hole across all this ground. Those barges showed up in 2019. There was 6 of them. The barge company could get 4 out. Those 2 have sat there since. So the levee was breached, river restoration. The floodplain is reconnected. And then through a partnership that American Rivers was working on with the Nature Conservancy, Ducks Unlimited, NRCS, and others, working with the landowners that can obviously no longer farm this, getting them enrolled in Farm Bill conservation programs, helping restore those properties. Those farmers then can take that funding, they can move up out of the floodplain if they still wish to farm, or a lot of them are ready to retire. Those lands are then going to go to Middle Mississippi River National Wildlife Refuge and be part of a new public recreational unit down there. Absolutely beautiful story. In that the private landowners have been able to help to get compensated, even though it's been a few years through the federal process. So, what are we doing? We're building momentum. Projects identified, we have a number. In Missouri, as Steve pointed out, huge number of dams, just over 23,000. A lot of those high hazard dams are not regulated, meaning nobody by law is required to even see if they go out if they're going to kill somebody. So, and I'm kind of putting that dramatic, but given all the bad stuff that happened last year in Missouri rivers, unfortunately very realistic. We are a member of the Missouri Stream Conservation, Connectivity, and Management team. So we'll be working with that group, which is a bunch of other nonprofits, federal and state representatives, to increase the rate of dam removal in the state of Missouri and look at strengthening state policies to start looking at some of these high hazard dams that could be causing these problems. Floodplains, we have a lot of floodplain stuff identified. Working with, as I said, Middle Mississippi River National Wildlife Refuge, but also Big Muddy National Wildlife Refuge. They can technically expand from down here at Ted and Pat Confluence Point all the way to the Nebraska-South Dakota border. So we want to look at how can we help them to increase getting flood-prone ground, restoring it, getting it into the public trust. So a number of examples, as I had mentioned earlier, working with Great Rivers Habitat Alliance, we are hoping to introduce some practices for private landowners that if they're planting agriculture in the floodplain, we have an edge of field practice, create some little mini marsh, and they flow all their water, all their drainage water out of their cornfields through this little floodplain, or through this little marsh. We know exactly how much nitrogen is taken out. You can have both worlds in the floodplain. New staff approved. I currently, American Rivers currently has 2 staff positions open. We are hiring a dam removal aquatic connectivity person for Missouri and Iowa because we see the potential here. And then we're also hiring a floodplains conservation person who will be the lower Missouri River. So from Lewis and Clark Dam, some here on the map on the wall, Lewis and Clark Dam in Yankton, South Dakota, where I lived for 2 years. Love Yankton, South Dakota. Sorry, I got to point out to YouTube in case anybody in South Dakota is listening. Love Yankton, South Dakota. From there down to here in St. Louis, and then the Mississippi River, essentially from the Iowa-Minnesota border down to the Missouri boot heel, and everything in between in Iowa and Missouri. Floodplain reconnection, floodplain protection, floodplain restoration. Hope to have both those staff on before Christmas, if we're lucky. And then exploring new opportunities. We're looking at what are the opportunities in the realm of state policy, both here in Missouri, in Iowa, in other states that we think there are policy actions that perhaps we can provide assistance with, whether that is dam removal, whether that's floodplain development, things of those nature. And then we're kind of starting here in St. Louis with the Central Region and staff, and we're expanding outward from here. Literally, we're starting here and expanding outward, downriver, upriver. So in the coming years, as this program gets rolling and bigger and self-sustaining, the prairies is probably where we'll be looking at next to increase our programs and our presence. So with that, that's all for me. I will hand it back over to Steve.
How about questions, Mike?
Oh, sorry, Lottie. Sorry. I thought I was gonna slide out there. Sorry. Yes. If anybody has any questions, happy to answer questions. Yes.
How does the Big River and the Merrimack and all the rivers that, how do those fit into your plan?
Man, I should have paid you to plant questions because that was a great question. I'm sorry I did not bring the Merrimack up. The Merrimack, and I'm going to mess it up, the Bourboise, the third river, and then, thank you, the Bourbose, yes. Those are going to be one of our priorities for our floodplain people, or for our floodplain person. We are a member of the Merrimack River Conservation Partnership. I actually was just talking to the Army Corps today about the Big River. They have, some folks may not know, within the Merrimack, it's all sorts of issues. The Big River, because that's coming out of the historic lead mining and nickel mining of Missouri, that has water quality issues. So impacts that all that brings on drinking water, mussel beds, things of that nature. The Merrimack itself, especially if anybody lives towards the south side, works towards the south side, obviously flooding issues closer to the metro. As we get further up, we're having a lot of erosion inputs. The Beaubois, the third one, that's much more agricultural up that watershed. So there we're looking at working with private landowners to possibly do things like floodplain restoration, cattle exclusion. You know, there's programs out there. Can we do cattle exclusion from important riparian corridors, things of that nature? So yes, it's one that I actually, Steve knows, I've been pushing American Rivers to get more involved in the Merrimack watershed for the last year. Now that we're getting the staff, I'm very much hopeful that both our floodplains and our dam removal staff, given how far that watershed goes down into the Mark Twain and the start of the Ozarks, that we can provide a lot of help there. Thank you for asking me about the Merrimack. Yes, Lizzie.
Do you know, Mike, that we have a state license plate that reads Missouri, the Great River State?
Okay.
Because after serving on your board and recognize what we have in St. Louis that people don't appreciate and don't promote, the confluence, Missouri, Mississippi, and Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of show me, national, show me, where's Missouri? Well, show me. I'm not sure. Missouri, the Great River State.
The Great River State.
We can all buy this license plate and help promote our rivers. It brings more people, tourism, attention to get a license plate when you renew or go online. It's Operation Claim Stream that we do. And we got it approved. We went to Jeff City. We had a team. We went to the tourism, and it's legal. You can buy it, and it promotes your rivers. Missouri, the Great River State.
Fantastic.
Love it.
Any other questions? Yes, Rick.
I've heard about this big muddy business. Can you explain that to me?
The big, which part?
Let me tell you mine.
Okay.
The big levees, the big ones, are south of Sykeston.
You said, all right, on the Mississippi River. Yeah.
20, what was it? 23 or something like that.
In my lifetime, 1993 was the big one on the upper river.
Yeah, the one from up in the Ohio River flood. Yeah, it might have been 27, but it was the whole Alleghenies. The Alleghenies are what it was at the Yazoo River gauge. My knowledge is this: our 93 flood was 1,200,000 cubic feet of flood. That flood was north of 2.8 million cubic feet per second down at Yazoo.
Yep.
The flood waters were 100 miles wide down there, and that was when I went on the board of American Rivers. That was the book we had to read about the real flood.
Yeah, the 1927 flood, the Great Flood.
The real flood is on the Mississippi. We haven't had it.
Yeah.
And that was a combination of a whole lot of different issues that came together for that big flood. Now, you talk about the big levee, and all the development of the levees were down south. I mean, they had 40 and 50-foot levees down there. They're huge. And then you come up here, and it's my understanding that the Illinois, on the Illinois side, they're pushing for river development. They want to develop up the Illinois side of the Mississippi River. There's a lot of pressure over there for that.
Okay.
Okay, that's just a data point for it. Over on our side, there was 8,000 acres that the I don't know if it was the railroads or what. They were trying to get this 8,000 acre piece of property up on the river above St. Charles.
is that still on the table where they wanted to put in the facilities for the barges, and they wanted an airstrip, and they wanted trucking, they wanted all those things to be available in that 8,000 acres that they had put into mind?
I can honestly say I don't know, because
Would you find out?
yeah, I'll find out. I'm unfamiliar with that.
You know, because that's up the north of us, and then you've got this business of the new water for the
Yeah.
yeah AI stuff.
Yeah.
Right there, just south of us.
I've not heard of a new intermodal. They are redoing what is a Lock and Dam 22 right now, and Lock and Dam 20. They're redoing 22, which is north here. 25 is next on the list for lock expansion. So if they're doing lock expansion and that's near 25, there could be intermodal with it, which would be which would be the rail that you're talking about. I don't know. The Army Corps is doing the lock expansion portion. Anything associated with it would be private business, but I can look into it. But yeah, to your point, after 1927, that's when the lock and dam started going in. So from the Ohio River confluence south, they're 500-year levees, 500 event levees. Why they're so high? From here up to where I'm from in the driftless, where we don't have levees, they're 100-year levees. And then from where I live to until you hit the Twin Cities, it's bluff to bluff, and that's it. Or where I'm from. So
Okay.
Well,
yep. Anyway. Yep.
Yeah, keep going.
Yep.
I wanted to mention a couple of other successes.
Yes, sir.
On the Allagash River in Maine, you mentioned that Canada, I think another dams have been removed from the Allagash. And the other is that oysters at the north end of the Hudson River.
Yep. And the Penobscot, also in Maine. So that was one of the, as far as agreements when you can win an agreement. The working with the hydropower company, the agreement was that we take out 2 big dams on the main stem plus a fish ladder, opened up 1,000 miles of spawning habitat, and the power company was able to increase their power production on the tributaries. So they make more money with a lower operating cost because they took out 2 expensive dams, and we got 1,000 miles of spawning habitat. So on that note of feel-good stories, let me just tell you one more. So I mentioned the Klamath dams earlier, 4 dams on the Klamath River from southern Oregon into northern California. Biggest river restoration project on the planet, 550 miles of spawning habitat. And if you were to look at a map of California that shows what the original spawning habitat was and what it is today, 98% of it is blocked by dams, right? So the idea that you can take out these 4 dams and open up 550 miles is fantastic. The tribe, the Yurok tribe, was the driver of that, and they were supported by a number of nonprofits like us. In doing so, the collective group was able to get these 4 dams out. 3 days after the last dam was out, this salmon had made it up above the top dam site, okay? So as the dams were coming out, 3 days. So 3 days. So now the you have reconnection of the ecosystem, and you have this beautiful thing happen where you now have spawning salmon back in the river. And if you go back to other stories like the Elwha River, there are now thousands of Chinook king salmon, right? Thousands now come upstream to spawn where just 10 years ago there were 0, right? So the point is, rivers are special, right? They're threatened. We can fix them, and we'd love for you to be a part of that. If you want to help us, then the main thing, like Mike said, here as we're establishing ourselves in the central region, the main thing is we want to grow our network. We want more people in the boat with us, if you'll forgive a boat analogy. So, by all means, if there are people that you know that might be, that are anglers or boaters or river lovers, and then, pointing to one of us or to AmericanRivers.org, and we'd love to have that. If any of you would like to host a dinner party with some of your friends where we could meet them and tell this story, again, rivers are resilient. They'll come back, like you saw with the salmon. We just need to give them a hand. So, all right, thank you so much. Thanks for the invitation.